Thanks, Larry.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the week before last, Mr. Trask came before the board and asked this item to be agendized. I don't see him in the audience. But Karen may have some comments on this. The question was regarding the water master service fee that's placed on the tax roll annually. By virtue of the RCD's authority from the Superior Court, I outlined the authority and the process by which that assessment is placed on the tax roll to Mr. Trask in a letter dated December 31st of this year, and sent that to him. Essentially, what the process is, the RCD is authorized as the water master by the Superior Court and granted the authority that's spelled out in the water code and the government code to do that. They establish a budget. They're required to notify the court, the users, or the assessees, for lack of a better word, and the board of that assessment, given some certain time frames. Once that's done, the auditor places it on the tax roll, and I, as tax collector, collect it with the property taxes in 2 installments, December and April. Left out several details there, but that is essentially the authority. It emanates from the courts to the water master, who is in fact the RCD, and we collect it like that. There have been, I understand, because I get the phone calls and notes, and every year there have been a lot of discussion and dispute over the validity of, or the amount of that assessment, the validity of that assessment, were proper notices made, etc. My observation is that there probably have been a few years in the past where all the notifications weren't done properly. I think this past year, I believe the auditor has determined that they have made those notices and their certification, at least properly, to the county, and that's how it gets on the roll, and that's how we collect it. I'm not sure if there are other questions or if Karen wanted to add to that. I know Karen attended their meeting last week, so she may have other comments.
I really don't have anything to add, but I am available. I have a lot of information, so if you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think because the process has been called into question, I think Mr. Trask, at least the conversation he made with me on the phone, and he wanted to meet with me privately so he could go over all that details, and I indicated to him that I can't do anything about it privately, but I said if he brings it in like he did at the meeting, last meeting, and you know, we have the discussion here in the room where everybody's involved and everybody can hear the answers. So I would like to know specifically what the law requires in terms of the steps that you have to go through to get an assessment to collect. And as you describe what those parameters are, I would like to know where the documents or actions that are required by you from whoever the parties are filed, and was that process adhered to.
Okay.
I mean, it'd be good to, from beginning to end, A to Z.
I have all that. If there's any holes in the process, go ahead.
Sure, I mean, and there's always that caveat, and council
Right.
will correct you and I or whoever.
Okay.
So.
The county's direction on placing these water fees on the tax roll are including California Water Code section 4275 through 4279. Short
So
story.
those are the codes that govern what you do.
Exactly.
Okay.
Those are the ones that pertain specifically to the county's obligation in processing these assessments. Now, the decree gives direction to the water master, in this case the Honey Lake RCD, on specifically what they have to do that. The county, let's see, this code refers to the department because it was written when DWR was the water master. Now the department in this code is referring to Honey Lake Valley RCD. The department on or before the 15th day of August of each year shall certify to the auditor and the board of supervisors of each county having a water master service area, yada, yada, yada. Apportionments for the.
They put that in the code?
They did. Right.
Wow.
Right. Apportionments for the ensuing fiscal year to be levied on the land used in the storage or diversion, yada, 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 of the water stored or diverted. Okay, the next section, the auditor shall enter the amounts of the respective apportionments against the respective parcels, yada, yada. The Board of Supervisors of each county in which there lies a water master service area or any portion thereof shall annually and at the time of levying county taxes levy on the land within the county, yada, yada, the amount sufficient to raise the amount certified by the department. And then it goes on to say that they'll be collected in on the same time and manner as other property taxes.
Now, when it talks about certified by the department, that's superseded because of the delegation of the contract under the court decree. But the department is now Honey Lake RCD.
Correct.
So,
And the certification is still required to be received by the county auditor and the board of supervisors from the RCD.
okay, was that done and when was that done?
It was done on August 10th. It was hand-delivered by the water master. The only thing I saw deficient was I received the cover letter identifying,
Now, he delivered it to you, but he didn't deliver it to the board of supervisors.
actually, I believe he did. I don't know if it was hand-delivered, but it was actually delivered to the assessor.
So the assessor is now the board of supervisors?
There's a list here. It was the chairman of the board at the time, that was Supervisor Hanson, Treasurer Tax Collector Richard Egan, and Judy Davis in my office, who is our property tax manager. So it was hand-delivered to me, the letter, the assessment list, the budget, and after that, I received the minutes from the board meeting. The Honey Lake RCD adopted the water master budget.
When did they meet?
They met, actually, they approved that budget twice, once on March 27th, 2013, and again on July 30th of 2013. And I looked at both budgets they adopted at that time, and I didn't see it. It was the same budget. It's not clear why it was adopted twice, but bases were covered.
So the water master fees that on that certified list is based on that budget?
Correct. And I did look and make sure that the assessment list reconciled back to the budget amount. And there was, if $160,000 was being collected.
Now, is the RCD, the board, are they required to certify the list that the water master delivered on the 10th?
Well, I would think so. Yeah, I don't know about certified, but it's their document.
Well, the term certified is used in the water code by August 15th. And
That's for the
and that's-
budget.
And I'm referring to Mr. Trask's,
Correct.
information in the packet of his dialogue back and forth with the treasurer. So I'm just trying to, in my mind, to make sure that the necessary steps were there. So the board certified a budget or adopted a budget, and based on that, this list that was delivered, I guess would be an extension of that budget act. So I guess it could be argued, but I don't know if the minutes reflect.
The minutes reflect that the distribution or the assessment list was discussed. And there were no, let's see.
Because Mr. Trask has taken the position that he felt that that action is where the problem lies in terms of how you connect the budget to the assessments that were levied, that was never done by the board, so therefore it was not a legitimate, implementation of the law. And I'm as a layperson, I'm going to have to defer to county council and whoever else to determine. But and he also claimed that it had come to your office after the deadline, so for you to include it was not. But your records clearly state.
I think he also said that there was no audit done, and that wasn't correct.
Yeah.
So.
I think there's one maybe technical deficiency in that the certification itself was unsigned, and we pointed that out to them. But like Karen has
Right.
suggested, the minutes reflect that it was adopted. So
Correct.
there may be a technical deficiency there that I'm sure they'll correct next year.
Yeah, and they are getting better. From where I stand, the water code says the auditor shall enroll those assessments. And I feel that the due diligence was done on my part to make sure that the list came in the format that it was supposed to, that the Honey Lake RCD Board, acting as the water master, is aware of those charges and approved them through their budget. So as far as the county doing, fulfilling our responsibility, I believe we did. I did.
I got a question, and it's probably more for Retta or Richard. If somebody wanted to give up their water rights, they wanted to give them up, so that they would no longer have this assessment, they would have to go to the court, right? Who's under the decree, asked to be removed, and then once that is honored, well, then it would be up to them to take that proper paperwork to go to the auditor, assessor, et cetera, to get that roof and the tax rolls, is that correct?
Well, I think they would, yes, they would have to go to court to do that. Then I think the process would be they would take it to the water master and say, now I'm no longer a decreed user, so you can't charge me pursuant to the water code. And then, that
And
would,
that's true.
Then the water master would bring
That's-
it to you.
yeah.
yes.
That's true of any special assessment that's placed on the tax roll. We would not remove it at the taxpayer's request. It would have to come, the removal would have to be at the request of the district.
From my side, that the argument or the case that I always hear is that those assessments, the 15th, the day you mentioned, the 15th of August, that deadline is never met. So by the time that people see the thing on their tax bill, they don't have proper time to, protest it. So they're either
Right.
stuck with either paying it, but that doesn't appear to be the fact. You said it was delivered on the
The
10th.
assessment list is coming to the auditor's office in time. And as far as the notice to the users, that's really kind of out of the scope of the county's responsibility. Although the decree does offer a remedy to anyone who would protest the fee or the budget that was adopted. And that would be to file their complaint with the court. If the dispute is found to be correct, any adjustment would come on the next tax roll or the next assessment.
The complaint that I've heard most, I think, from the taxpayers, and it's a legitimate one, is that, like Karen suggested, the remedy is for them to go to court and complain about that. And some of the water users have told me they've gone to the court and wanting to protest that, and the response from the court is something like, hire an attorney and
I'll see you later.
yeah, and they don't want to go to that expense. I sympathize with that, with that concern. It's out of our control, unfortunately.
Right, and I agree with that. And I will add that I believe that right about 230 parcels have in the Lassen County have a water user fee placed on the tax bill. So, and of the 230, I've received complaints, but probably from maybe 5 different people at most, so.
The, going back to the court, but is that a service that, that they're supposed to do for us? Are they supposed to give that kind of answer?
I don't think it's clear. The court order, which I think is the governing document, Jim probably has it in that packet,
Here, you can have it.
says that their remedy is to go to, basically appeal to the court. And, I'm sorry, I didn't bring my copy.
But anybody, they have the right to represent themselves, if the court tells them to get an attorney.
Yeah, and, I've heard this all secondhand. It's surprising to me, like I put in my letter, it's surprising to me that the court won't hear their complaints, and that's why I copied the Superior Court judge on this correspondence. I haven't heard anything from them, but I plan to follow up on that.
So, Karen, from the time that the fees are assessed and you get your deal prior to the 15th of August, is there any way that, that could, what happens after then? I mean, is there any way that these people could be finding out about this later than they should? Once you receive it, you hand the information over, is that
Right.
assessment readily available to the person?
I've made this, anyone who has inquired about the fees that would be assessed, I've, made available to them the list. If
Okay.
they haven't been able to get it from the RCD, I would provide a list for them.
I think they're required to be given that list by June 15th. Each
Yeah.
assessment.
So
That's what it-
before they give it to you?
Right.
Yes.
If I could address your question, I think the perspective you come through on that question would probably be legitimate for somebody who's new, who just acquired some property and this is their first rodeo. But the vast majority of these assessees are people, this has been historically done for many, many years, in some cases for generations. And so that process of knowing that they're going to have this assessment, and they can influence that assessment in two ways. And one of them is by the choice of property they buy. And if you don't, or if you're not included, you're not included. But second of all, if they feel that the fee is exorbitant or whatever, they have the ability to involve themselves in the governance process with the RCD and the management contracts and so on, providing of the service, which they didn't have very much in prior years because DWR handled it directly and you were dealing with the state bureaucracy and it was somewhat removed. So, at least what I told Mr. Trask is that, obviously he had, been to the RCD meetings and they had their disputes and they decided to do one thing and he wanted to do something different or how it affected him different. And he's trying to address his grievance and, and it's legitimate for him to go through all these conversations. But in reality, that's where these fees originate from. So if he wants to be relieved of those or have those fees minimized, he needs to do it at that level because that's where they're being imposed. I mean, they adopt the budget drives what the fees are. So if they cut the budget in half, you cut the fees in half. I mean, that's the reality as I tried to explain to him. Obviously, he felt frustrated by that process, and we know there's a lot of frustration within and centering around that organization. And we've seen it in the boardroom, and we've seen it with the disputes over the directors and so forth. But once that's done, this is a ministerial act that the auditor and others are required to do based on the code. So the real question there is the document in sufficient form, was it finalized in a sufficient fashion, and whether it's signed or not, the courts are going to find it was the intent and they met that. I mean, we had that issue, Tom, in the recall, the processing of the recall stuff. There was, things were kicked out because they didn't meet form or whatever, and that was a judgment call that was made by, by the staff, and that can be challenged at any time, and then you go to the court, and the court says whether the intent was there. So whether, the thing was signed, as a matter of form, the intent was there and it met, the requirements that the law set forth for the timing. Now, if they showed up on the 22nd of August or the 5th of September and tried to, let's backdate this and go back and do it on August 15th, the boat sale, they probably would be out of luck. But, I think he indicated to me that they did not file, in that time frame in a timely fashion. But you're very clear in terms of outline. That's why I asked for that time frame as to when it does, because it sounds like to me that, he could obviously address it in court, but administratively, I think the county departments did what they were required to do, whether you like it or not.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you, Karen.
I do have on the subject one other item to add, and that is, concern over the completion of annual audits. And the RCD has had audits completed, for the last 2 fiscal years. There's one currently due for June 2013. And I understand they have engaged an auditor to complete that. So audits have been completed, and the water master services and financial activity has been accounted for separately, so.
Now, there's,
Are they always that slow in completing their audits?
But actually, the timeline is, you have all agencies, government agencies, special districts, the city and even the county has up to 12 months after the end of the fiscal year to do an audit, so.
and speaking of audits, but I have two things I need to go. The county audit was completed, our regular county audit was completed prior to December 31st. Karen actually delivered us a copy, and I would ask that maybe, rather than wait until April or May to discuss it, that we try to get that presentation on our agenda so we can be, because that was a criticism. It doesn't do you any good if you get your audit in May for something that happened the previous June, because whatever horse got let out of the barn is long gone. And, you know, and so that's the importance of the timeliness of the audit. There was another issue that Mr. Trask at least raised, and there again, it would tie back to the audit, and I would be curious to know what the audit was found. And he, in his conversation, he brought in the fact that apparently last spring sometime, and I'm not sure when or what, but supposedly, and I'm reaching back because Mr. Evans, who was an RCD appointed member that the board had appointed prior to his resigning, had actually came and saw me with a concern and kind of a complaint, which I told him I was not empowered to do anything with. I kind of relayed it to county counsel's office, and after she kind of took a quick look, realized, you know, they've got counsel, and for her office to be dealing with it was not an appropriate thing, and it kind of sat there for a bit, and ultimately I believe the documents were all mailed back from counsel's office back to Mr. Evans, and I think it wasn't too long after that that he tendered his resignation. But at the center of the concern that was raised was apparently there were one or more members of the board, of the RCD board, had been in receipts of some grant fund or something, had gone and opened up a bank account at one of the local banks, and there were copies of supposedly the deposit receipt, which I can't believe a bank would. I guess you can take a napkin and write something down, and I guess it could be considered a legitimate. The bank always makes me fill out my deposit slips, and they have to be pretty neat about it, or they don't like that. But anyway, so this account was there of the funds that supposedly belonged to the RCD, but when the other directors became aware of it and went to the bank, were basically told because there are not signatures on the card. And so in every organization I've ever belonged to, you have an organization and you have officers, not only that, but they want a certified copy of your minutes, saying, you know, with the seal and everything, saying that, you know, that these people are authorized on behalf of the organization to open an account, and it delineates who the signatures are for either adding monies or withdrawing monies from these accounts. Well, these records that were part of these documents that I just briefly saw indicated something totally different from that. So my question is that the audit that would take place, does it reflect how accounts are managed, and can individuals do stuff like that? To me, that just sounded like totally bizarre. And I know Mr. Evans was distressed about it, and he apparently had shared that information with Mr. Trask, because he was pretty, and he wanted to kind of show me these documents. And I said, well, you know, wait, I already, you know, Mr. Evans tried to show this to me, and I can't do anything about that, but I think that needs to be publicly addressed. And I think it was alluded to even in a couple of the newspaper reports of some of the meetings, the one that we had down at the Vets Hall that kind of related back to that episode. So can you address the veracity of side accounts like that?
I don't know all of the circumstances in that one incident. I do know that there's been, the audits were completed after that. I think my observation is that Honey Lake RCD went from, you know, maybe a less than $10,000 a year operation to almost $500,000, and plus the water master. So they had definitely had growing pains, and they're still, you know, they had to go through policies and procedures in place so everybody knew that safeguards existed and that they had internal controls.
Well,
There was no money missing.
well, there
So-
wasn't an assertion that money was missing, it was just how it was being managed and who was responsible. So do you have the full board managing it, you know, or do you have
Right.
some of the board manage this money and other board members manage that money, or however, it just, you know, I mean, it didn't seem something that was consistent with the way I think most people would perceive how public bodies and public funds are being handled. Of course, the audit is going to address those kinds of questions, or I like to think that they do.
Right.
Now, I don't want to, I don't know if this is appropriate. I know Mr. Claypool is sitting in the back of the room, and he is a member of the board. And I've never talked to Mr. Claypool about this, so, but it was represented to me that you were one of the individuals that went to the bank to try to find out about, you know, this supposed account, and were basically, other than acknowledging it existed, were denied because you were not, you know, authorized or whatever. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was what was represented to me by Mr. Evans, so maybe that could help address this question, if
Right.
indeed what the real situation is, so. Mr. Chairman, if it's possible, I'd like
Right.
to know.
And again, I would just stress that they've done a great job in starting to put together the policies and procedures and internal controls that are going to alleviate just that kind of concern. So I'll let Jesse.
Sorry, before we carry on, Red, I have a question. The agenda item is just to discuss the RCD Water Master Assessment process. Is it appropriate we're talking about accounts open, unauthorized? I mean, we're kind of getting off.
Well, it was part of Mr. Trask's complaint when you read the packet.
I'm just saying, I'm comparing the agenda to about what we're.
I thought the agenda was to try to address the complaints that he raised, so I thought it was inherently part of it, so.
So I just want to get,
Yeah,
I think you're fine to continue
Okay.
the discussion,
Very
because the
good.
discussion allows a large umbrella.
okay,
Of
I just didn't want
that, yeah.
people to be accused and then,
If
they're not
somebody
here to.
Has a
They
concern, we
didn't
can
say,
re-agendize it.
to talk about.
well, we may have to agenda and be
Right.
more specific. in that
Unauthorized
respect.
bank.
Going
account,
outside what
and
was
then,
in-
You know, but anyway, if you're good with it, Karen, go ahead.
I am, because it was generated by Mr. Trask's letter. We can
Oh.
always re-agendize it.
No, that's fine,
Yeah.
yeah, perfect, yeah.
Just Claypool, County Valley RCD. For the agenda item, I think Mr. Egan's absolutely correct. In the past, there has been some technical deficiencies on, process.
Before your time.
yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thanks for knowing that. Cool. There were some technical deficiencies in due process by the RCD, specific to the apportionments, according to the court order on when things got filed. The two budgets that Mrs. Fossey related to this year, the first one was an open meeting budget for the Water Master Service. That's a noticed meeting. Water users have a chance to participate on that. The second budget includes the first Water Master budget with the general budget for the RCD, and that's the second one. And so that was open, noticed meeting, plenty of time for all the water users to comment on that. And so after that, it goes to the county, and they've done their thing just right. We're not going to, as a board, let that go. That's our source of revenue. That's how we, besides our grant funding, that's our guaranteed operating expense for the portions of that that's used in addition to funding the deputy water master and so forth. As far as the accounts, in trying to determine the corrective path for some of the technical deficiencies that the board's had with controlling documents on the bank accounts. I did go to the bank as a signator, and before I signed anything, I wanted to know what controlling documents were in place that regulated the bank accounts. And that's when the bank gave us, when I say us, Mr. Evans, myself, at the time he was the vice chair of the County RCD, a hand-wrote letter opening and verifying an account. That was just very concerning. Just, how do you respond to that?
Because it was never brought to your board?
That was 3 days after a general board meeting. And so Mr. Evans took that to the Lassen County Sheriff's Department and handed it over to them. Said, look, this does not appear to be right. Now, me personally, I feel that it was a very bad decision to do something correct. I don't believe that there is a leaking of funds. I don't believe anything like that. I believe it was a very bad decision on how to get something done. Maybe I'm a bit naive, but that's where it's been. And that's been the other side of the concerns that Mr. Trask has and others with the finances, is how is due process, due diligence, what have you, with how the RCD